Hi everyone, I'm America Josh and welcome to the weekly whip around where we spend 15 minutes every week going through the top 3 questions that hit my inbox or hit social media, or we interview someone exciting who's helping out the community in some way, shape or form, the legends that are supporting all of you. So thank you for joining me. It is July 19, it is episode 8. We have the top 3 questions that have hit social media or hit my inbox in the last couple of weeks, and I wanted to jump right in. Question number 1 that we've been having is where to get an E3 visa around the world. Question number 2, spousal visas and social security. You may have seen a lot going on with social security and some questions popping up all over social media. And 3, notifications everywhere. Number 3, driver's licenses and what you need to know to make sure that you're complying with the law and making sure we're answering all the questions that states might have for you. So, first things first, it's always worth noting that I am not an immigration attorney. I'm not an attorney at all. I'm not a professional in this space. These are all my opinions. So if you do have specific questions, the best thing I can advise you is always to go get individual legal advice. Go get accountants, go get professionals, speak to them directly about your situation, but I'll give you the 30,000 foot view of what's going on, and that should help you out. So thanks again for joining. Question 1. So, the question that pops up is where can you get an E3 visa, or where can you get a US visa from around the world right now? And this is changing a lot. It changes day to day, and you'll find that a lot of lawyers, a lot of immigration attorneys will say, first off, that the best thing you can do is always go back to Australia if you're doing an E3 visa, especially your first one. Now, I want to point out that you don't have to go to Australia for your first one. You don't have to go to Australia for any of your E3 visas. But Australians or the US consulates in Australia know the visa best because they do a lot of them. They process so many of them, so many more than around the world. So it's worth going back to Australia if you can. It is way more familiar. The advantage there is also that you have the ability to register with US travel docs when you're looking for an appointment, and you can switch between locations without having to pay multiple appointments. So you can look at the availability in Sydney and in Melbourne, for example, without having to pay twice. You can also do mail-ins. For a lot of people, when you fill in the forms on US travel docs, you'll find that you have the ability to go on, fill in the answers to the questions, and it will tell you whether or not you're allowed to apply via mail-in. For many people, that is going to be a way quicker turnaround. You're going to be able to head straight back to Australia and do it right away. It does take a couple of weeks to process and come back, but we're finding that a lot more people are having a lot more success that way. I want to point out that on americajosh.com, if you go up in the top bar, or if you go into the main menu, there is the US visa appointment tracker right at the top. That has submissions from all around the world from people who are doing their visa appointments right now. It explains, they get to write a little bit of a description about what their experience was like. They get to rate it out of 5. They get to say if they recommend it. They talk about their turnaround times, and they talk about wait times. So this will give you a snapshot right now of what the appointments are looking like and how easy it is to get an appointment right now. So right now, if we have a look live, we've got London rated as one of the best locations, which London is a consistently good location to go to for visa appointments. It has been really a stalwart throughout the whole of even COVID when they reopened, and ever since then it's really been a great one to go to. Sydney and Melbourne are the next 2. Mexico's a difficult one because Mexican residents can go to Mexico, but it's not possible right now for third country nationals like people who are living in the US or living in Australia to go to Mexico to get a visa appointment. And then Singapore and Bridgetown, Barbados. Barbados is where I did my first visa renewal, and it was a sensational visit. Worth having a look into because right now that is becoming much more available, which is fantastic for people looking for a relatively short trip out of the States to go get a visa renewal. So make sure you're looking at all the appointments. Make sure you're joining there are Facebook groups that are talking about E3 visa renewals all the time. There's a few on the America Josh's New Friends group. So make sure you join America Josh's New Friends on Facebook if you're on Facebook, because there are chats constantly going on about visa updates, and we're always processing new information. So please do, if you've just done a visa appointment, please head to americajosh.com and go to the US visa review tracker up the top and submit your latest appointment details. How was it? What did you think? what do people need to know, where do you have to leave your bags, all that kind of stuff can be found in the reviews on there. Second question, spousal visas and social security numbers. So what happened in 2021 was the rules changed for spouses of E1, E2, E3, and L2 and L1 visas. So the spouses of people on E3 visas, for example, instead of getting the E3D designation, which meant them as a dependent, which requires you to go through the work authorization process. You need an EAD if you want to work. They've changed those rules. So in 2021, they made it that the spouse of someone on an E3, for example, as well as these other E1, E2, E3, L1, and L2, you get automatic work rights. So instead of E3D, you now get designated an E3S or E3DS in some cases. What this means is that when you enter the country, you are immediately allowed to start working without having to wait for the full process of getting an EAD, which is a hugely time-consuming process and can take, in some cases, up to 9 months. This is wonderful and fantastic, but there is a second requirement if you want to work in the US, and that is that you need a social security number. So you don't need one to start working, but you do need to have started the process. So a lot of employers will say you need to go get your social security before we'll even consider hiring you. So people are going to the social security office and with their E3S stamp, and that should mean they get automatic work rights, and they're getting there and they're finding out that they don't have the ability to get a social security. The person behind the desk will say, I'm sorry, you need an EAD, you need work authorization to proceed. Now, this is not the case. The Social Security Office has come out and said in early 2022, they said that they would fix this process. They would send out a company-wide or an organization-wide update with new policies to make sure that everyone was availed of all the latest information about the E3S status. This, unfortunately, has not flowed very well through to individuals who are actually doing the processing. It's a huge organization. It's a difficult process. So we desperately want it to be fixed, but the person behind the desk in many cases doesn't know that they don't have to wait for an EAD. So a few tips, because it has become a frustrating problem for people all over the internet, and I completely understand. Make sure you go to, on americajosh.com, we do have an article all about this under E3S, or you can search L2, or you can search SSA on our search bar. This has a link directly through to the Social Security policies. So it links through to the Social Security website and at SSO's website. And it allows you to find the actual piece of policy on their own website that dictates whether you're allowed to get a Social Security number without a work authorization document. You want to print that out. Don't only highlight what section it is, actually print out the piece of paper and take it with you with all of the other documents that you require for Social Security, because in many cases that will at least give you the first introduction into making sure that you get the appropriate process. Don't get angry with the people, it won't help you. Don't yell and scream. It's incredibly frustrating, and I know in many cases we just want to say, like, come on, let me have what I'm entitled to. But try and work with the officer that you're speaking to. Try and chat with them and explain that the policy has changed, that the E3S is different from the E3D. Show that you've got the papers from the Social Security Office that actually show their own internal policies, and work through with them. Try to speak to a supervisor, again, being over the top polite. It's the only thing that can help, because right now we're still seeing a lot of people being rejected, even when we just heard on social media today that people are having their documents received and they're going through and working through it, and they're finding out that they're being rejected because later on when someone's processing it, it's still not going through the process. So this is going to be frustrating, and I know it is, but we'd love for you to send information about the experiences that you've had to ssn@americajosh.com or josh@americajosh.com. Send it directly to me and explain what situation you've had and where you are, because it is happening completely different and uniquely across different locations around the US. Again, it's frustrating, but try and work through this. Read all the information we've got on the site. It should help, because we're finding that when people do go in with all the information, that office gets an update, and we're finding it's a little bit easier for everyone. That's question 2. Question 3 is around driver's licenses. Now, a lot of you are coming to the US and arriving, and you've likely got a foreign license from your home country, and you may have got an international driver's license. Both incredibly smart, both incredibly worth having. In most cases, the international driver's license is not at all worth it. It's simply a translation document that allows you to go to countries that don't speak the language that your home country speaks and translates that document for them. But in some states in the US, the international driver's license is actually completely necessary. So having that, totally worth it. It's actually a legal requirement in some states. Leads me to my broader point is that this is all dictated by the DMV in your state. There is not a specific rule about how licenses work for the whole nation. You'll find when moving to the US that everything is done state by state. It's unique in the fact that each state has its own rules. They'll completely oversee the whole process from start to finish. So don't think that when you Google how to get a driver's license in America, the information that you're reading will be necessarily relevant to your state. Make sure you find the DMV, and in some states they're not even called DMVs, but the driving authority in your state, to read their policies on foreign and overseas licenses. That all being said, there are a few general rules about how this works. Normally what the policy is that if you're a tourist coming in and you're spending a few weeks or even a few months or a couple of months on an ESTA and you're traveling around the states and you're just visiting, you are completely fine to travel on your foreign license and your translation document or your international license. Once you become resident in the United States or in the state that you are now living, which normally means having an address, getting some utilities sent to you, if you've got a job, don't look for the technical rules, but like if you're telling yourself, I live in this state, you live in that state, because most of them are pretty generalized about how they define residency. If you reside in that state, a counter starts. And in most states, it's 30 days. So at 30 days after residing in that state, you have to get a local license or you are driving illegally. Even though you've got a completely valid foreign license and someone on a holiday could come in and drive on that license, that doesn't mean that you can. Now, why is this essentially important, and why do you may have seen me on Facebook going on and on about this, but if you drive on that foreign license, in many cases, you might be driving illegally. Now, you're a safe driver, you're completely fine. The problem will arise with insurance. In this country, if you have an accident, there is a high chance that somebody will sue you for causing injuries or damage to their property, or both. And those insurance claims, or those claims against you when they sue you, will be astronomical numbers. Your insurance policy will generally cover this, and that will make everything relatively okay, and you'll be able to not have to pay anything out of pocket. If you are driving on a foreign license and your state does not permit that, you will be driving illegally, and even if you took out a policy of insurance and you spoke to the person and explained that right now you don't have a local license and they said, whatever, that's fine, you need to read your policy, because if you are considered to be driving illegally, most policies will not pay out. So even though you've got the policy, it won't pay, and they'll say, we have an exclusion for driving illegally, and you are suddenly completely out of pocket. So make sure you read your DMV, your local state DMV's information. Make sure you know exactly what is required of you when you come to the United States and to the specific state that you're moving to. All of those things are critically important, because you'll end your trip very early when you get sued for literally multi-millions of dollars. I want to make sure that you've got the option to stay here, to thrive in the US, and really enjoy your time, and that shouldn't be something you even worry about. In many states, you'll actually have to sit at least a written test. In many, like New York State, you do have to sit the written test and the driving test, so it's you and a bunch of 16-year-olds. Even if you've been driving for 30, 40, 50 years, you'll still have to do the whole test again to get your license. So again, check your local DMV, go through the information, make sure you know exactly what is required of you, do it right, make sure you take care of yourself, because this should be a fun adventure for you and not one that results in you getting sued for millions of dollars. Thank you very much for joining the Weekly Whip Around. I hope you've enjoyed the answers to these top 3 questions. Obviously, if you head to americajosh.com, we'd love to hear what questions you've got and answer them every Wednesday. We'll always be going through all the social media channels that we're on. Make sure you join America Josh's new friends on Facebook. The password is $pizza if you would like to join that community. And really just get out there and engage with the community. We've got events, we've got all sorts coming up in the coming weeks. Follow the newsletter to see all of those. But I hope you've enjoyed this weekly whip around, and we'll see you next week.